The blade of a lightsaber can tell us a huge amount about the identity and the character of the person wielding it. The crystals that are necessary to create the deadly beam of plasma take on a colour profile based on the particular presence in the Force of their bonded Jedi or Sith. Plenty of people have talked about the meanings of lightsaber blade colours, and most of them do a pretty good job at giving you a vague understanding of what each colour represents. But the meanings of each blade colour are so much deeper than most people talk about. So in this video, we're going to look in depth at the meanings and characteristics reflected in the colours of the lightsaber blade, and the 11 major archetypes that present themselves. The blade starts with a kyber crystal, a small, naturally occurring geode from the planet Ilum, which appears colourless on its homeworld. That is, of course, until a ritual, known as the Gathering, collects a series of Jedi younglings into the caves of Ilum in search for the first component for their lightsaber. As the younglings navigate through the deposits of crystals, undertaking trials and overcoming adversity, a crystal will eventually choose the youngling, and a bond is formed between the two. This bond is audible to the chosen Jedi, typically as a resonant chime or ringing that carries through the caves. Following this sound without guidance is often the final trial the youngling will undertake while on the planet, and once they've found their crystal, the bond begins to take form, character, which eventually turns the colour of the crystal to its appropriate hue, depending on what the youngling's attitudes in the Force are and what role they wish to fulfill within the Order. Each colour has an archetypal figure associated with it, and the Jedi that wield them embody this figure in their use of the weapon. Crystals that produce blue blades are often bonded to those that we can classify as Jedi Guardians. It's the most commonly occurring and best understood lightsaber colour as of writing this. Blue is a colour with deep association to the natural world, and in people it often conjures up ideas of bravery, dedication, and calmness. Younger Jedi are most commonly seen with blue blades, as youthfulness is often a catalyst for acts of valour in adverse circumstances. A Jedi Guardian embodies these qualities and carries them forward in service to the Force. Guardians are so called because they often put themselves between adversity and innocence. They give greatest value to the principles of loyalty, honour, and selfless commitment. It's the Guardians that run head-on towards their foes and exhaust every ounce of strength they can muster in their dedication to preserving life. They are selfless to a fault, but the true nature of the Jedi Guardian is to stand their ground in the face of danger and death, fulfilling their oaths to the grave if necessary, but to embrace the journey and the outcome with cool heads. Whether embroiled in a fierce lightsaber fight, or staring down a numerically superior army, the Jedi Guardian finds their composure, defends their charge fearlessly, but with peace in their hearts. However, another connotation of blue is piety, righteousness that stems from blind reverence, acceptance of an answer without question. Jedi are known to espouse the idea that only a Sith deals in absolutes, the folly being that this statement is in itself an absolute. This can put Jedi Guardians in a position of hypocrisy if they're not careful, and Guardians are noticeably less tactful, diplomatic than other archetypes. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ima Gunday, and Plo Koon are excellent examples of the Jedi Guardian archetype, and model users of the blue blade. Green is the second most common blade colour after blue, and is seen as a more mature blade colour within the Jedi Order. Another colour that's often linked to the natural world, green symbolises growth and renewal, with many older or more experienced Jedi having green lightsaber blades, almost like a coming-of-age transition. Green is also very much intertwined with the concepts of progressiveness, foresight, wisdom, and stability. Within the Order, those that possess green lightsabers are known as consulars, paragons of diplomacy and justice, and skilled arbiters. In line with their tact, consulars are quite progressive thinkers, weighing pros and cons against the weight of an outcome, and they're often respected by those that benefit from their problem solving, because they aren't afraid of unorthodox solutions if they're the most prudent. It's a common trend that however great their proficiency, consulars are reluctant to draw their weapon with intent to use it, as they put greater value in reason and logic than in resolutions by force. These Jedi are also skilled at divination. Having developed an acute self-awareness, they're able to quiet their minds and enter a meditative trance to reach out in the Force for guidance. Unfortunately, many Jedi can become over-reliant on this skill and blind themselves to the present by focusing too heavily on the prospects of the future. Often well-travelled, on account of their age and the nature of their job, they are wiser and more knowledgeable than the majority of the galaxy, and consulars tend to emphasise the importance of culture, expression, and freedom in their dealings. Unsurprisingly, Jedi consulars are normally very grounded individuals, with a keen attention for detail in their surroundings, and a knack for problem solving. These qualities make them among the most stable and infallible figures within the Jedi Order. Conversely, individuals that enjoy a wealth of knowledge run the risk of bloating with it, becoming arrogant, dogmatic, and overly self-certain. By and large, however, Jedi consulars are figures of intellectual and diplomatic authority, and their green blades often identify the most reliable members of the Order. Prominent Jedi consulars include Qui-Gon Jinn, Master Yoda, and Luminara Unduli. Cyan is a colour that exists between blue and green. You might assume Jedi that have cyan blades are an ideological blend of the Consular and the Guardian, and you'd be absolutely right. In terms of symbolism, cyan is linked with intuition, which is effectively decisive, instinctual responses, following the subconscious informing oneself of accumulated experiences and knowledge. In much simpler terms, intuitiveness is the combination of the decisiveness of the Guardian and the wisdom of the Jedi Consular. We can call this archetype the Maverick. As the name would suggest, cyan blade wielders are somewhat solitary figures that conduct themselves with the belief that they are knowledgeable enough to take decisive action without need for further consultation. Where the Guardian relies on logic and the Consular relies on diplomacy, the Maverick trusts their instinct to perform their actions. Mavericks usually have a very personal relationship with the Force as a result, and often follow what they perceive as the will of the Force, wherever that takes them. Exploratory and curious, Mavericks are often drawn to peace and tranquility, as opposed to seeking a cause to serve like a Guardian. But when conflict does arise, they're not comfortable being stationary in thought like a Consular. Certainly by the time of the Clone Wars, Jedi Mavericks were rare, and cyan blades were rarer still. But it's possible that in the wake of the Great Jedi Purge, survivors were forced into the role of Maverick. After prolonged exposure to such a character, a green or blue crystal had a chance of morphing into the cyan hue that reflected this perspective. It's believed that this is why Anakin's blue lightsaber appeared cyan in tone in A New Hope, while in the possession of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Cal Kestis is also a character that I think is best suited to a cyan blade, but you're free to disagree with me in the comments. Next up is red. Red is an evocative colour, regardless of its subject, and with lightsabers it's no different. This is by no means a colour that the Jedi are connected to. The Jedi way is very much about neutering the effect of one's emotions, finding balance and control. Red is very much a Sith colour. The primary connotations of red are all emotional: anger, love, passion, rage, vigour. It's not a naturally occurring colour among kyber crystals. In fact, to achieve this colour, the wielder has to subject the crystal to a process known as bleeding, which involves the user taking all of their emotions that feed the dark side, and that the Sith derive their power from, pain, rage, hate, fear, and so on, and pouring it into the crystal, torturing it. Exposing these crystals to such powerful emotions in their purest form was, in a way, agonizing for them. Imagine that someone you're bonded to, someone that you know and trust, starts filling your head with all of their fears, all of their pain and anger and hatred, until it drowns out everything that makes you, you. For a person, this procedure would induce hysteria and insanity and an overwhelming need for release. That is in effect what a red kyber crystal represents. Within the hilt of every Sith lightsaber is a consciousness whose sole remaining faculty is to bleed, agonized and screaming. That should indicate the caliber of person that wields a red blade. They are, if nothing else, cruel and self-centered. An appropriate archetype for this colour would be the megalomaniac, someone with an obsessive desire for power. Power is the motivation of any and all Sith, whatever form their position may take. Nobleman, politician, tyrant, power was their main goal. The megalomaniac is a volatile figure, quick to anger, domineering in love, overwhelmingly passionate, savage in rage, and vigorous in action. Because of their drive and clarity of vision, wielders of red blades are extremely successful in their endeavours, but are characteristically short-lived people. Bright flame burns twice as bright, and often they try to snuff out all the other flames in their vicinity. Notable megalomaniacs include Darth Sidious, Darth Vader, and Darth Maul. Purple is unique among lightsabers. It's not a blade colour formed by the influence of two compatible perspectives. Far from it. Purple is a colour created by forcing together the directly opposing sides of the Force and generating harmony. The knowledge and the strength required to achieve this colour is rare, and this blade colour is even more so. Many Jedi balk at the notion of balancing light and dark, fearing the addictive, consuming nature of the dark side would be too much for anyone, but they'd be wrong. We know of several figures that have employed a purple lightsaber blade, and they're linked by commonalities. Behind the purple blade, the figure is tenacious, inquisitive, and intelligent. They are the scholar, knowledgeable, ambitious, and powerful. Very few individuals have the drive or the patience necessary to achieve harmony between the two extreme, polarized sides of the Force. Those that do should not be underestimated. They are capable of great things, and often sit in positions of authority as a result. Symbolically, purple is linked to nobility, luxury, and opulence, and in combination with a decadently adorned hilt, that takes on a physical presence as well. The scholar is always drawn to information, and they are meticulous in consuming and storing information across a wide range of disciplines. They're extraordinarily intelligent, if a little bit superior, but unlike the consulars, who seek to understand the way of things, scholars are more concerned with knowing the way of things. Powerful, analytical, and intelligent, but also proud, conceited, and dogmatic. Scholars are very complex and nuanced individuals, but their willingness to accept both sides of the Force makes them a valued and progressive figure within the Jedi Order. Notable individuals with purple lightsabers include Mace Windu, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and Darth Revan. Canonically, this blade is actually more common than you might think. It was the standard coloration of the Jedi Sentinels that guarded the temple on Coruscant. Though there's no definite account for how numerous these guards were, for a structure as large and as labyrinthine as the temple, we can assume that yellow was not an uncommon colour for Jedi and visitors to the sanctuary to see. It's also notable for being the colour of Rey's lightsaber. When she finally creates her own personal weapon, the blade takes on this colour, which seems fitting. To create yellow, one must equally blend green and blue. That is to fall between the attitudes of the Jedi Guardian and the Jedi Consular, respectively. Indicative of this balance is the role of the most numerous users of this colour, the Temple Guards. They were the caretakers of the temple, if you like, tasked with donning a mask, and in their anonymity were sworn to defend not only the walls of the temple, symbolically protecting the Order from physical attack, but also to lay down their lives for the knowledge and insight stored within the many reliquaries and libraries housed within. As such, they weren't simply warriors like the Guardians, or diplomats like the Consulars. Their blade colour fits the role of those tasked with the defence and service of the legacy, the culture, the arts, the many myths and stories of the Jedi. Symbolically, yellow represents optimism, caution, and clarity. Rey, for example, is extremely wary of the power that she's inherited from her grandfather. The Palpatine name is infamous for the suffering that their power can inflict, and she's conscious not only to hide her name, but to fear and restrict her power as much as she can. That said, she is infectiously optimistic, trying always to find and pursue the silver linings, and to make whatever she can from a bad situation. This is a possible tendency carried over from her days as a scrapper on Jakku, but it's a tendency that draws yellow greater than green, blue, or red. Her optimism and wariness seems to give her a degree of clarity, demonstrated quite profoundly in how quickly she takes to the physical force, and how easy it is for her to hear the disembodied voices of those that have become one with the cosmic force. Sentinels are not solitary in nature, but are capable of existing solely with their own mind for company. To wear a mask for years at a time, or to be exiled, or even to take exile upon oneself, shows a strength of will and character, and self-reliance that is uncommon among Jedi and Sith alike. The Sentinel is watchful, but prepared, cautious, but optimistic, patient, but driven. Their clarity of vision can often make them seem cold or stubborn, but this is in their nature, and lack of variation in shades of the yellow blade show that it's a consistent feature in the personalities behind the mask and behind the blade. Orange is a somewhat obscure blade colour, and so far we haven't seen any wielders of this blade in canon. So instead of analysing the wielder and inferring the characteristics that manifest this fiery colour, we've got to examine the colour and see if we can isolate the traits that might create this unique blade hue. Symbolically, orange is a colour that has both negative and positive connotations. It is strongly tied to adventure, energy, and creativity, but also to warning, to danger. By now I think it's clear that the greatest influence on the colour of a blade is how the Force is used by the wielder, and how they treat and value it. The red blade of the megalomaniac is driven by their pursuit of power, the green of the consular by a thirst for knowledge. But to manifest and control an orange blade, the user has to be adventurous and energetic, but with an air of danger. There's an air of devilry and mischief about it, something that wouldn't quite fit with the narrative of the Jedi that we've seen from the Republic's latter years. I think this is in part why we see them so rarely. Anyone that might have an orange blade would be as far away from the constraints of the temple, pushing boundaries and exploring the unknown across the galaxy. To create this colour, you blend yellow with red, an interesting combination in terms of what those blade colours are linked to. The power and malice that often comes with a bleeding crystal, but the optimism and caution needed to create the yellow blade. So, cautiously adventurous, scrupulous perhaps, and potentially the energy in yellow and vigour in red are one and the same. They would be very similar to the Maverick and their Cyan blades, but unlike the Mavericks, the Scout can be dangerous too. A scoundrel then? Well no, you see I think more of a scout. A daring pathfinder, right on the fringes of the galaxy. Intrepid and vigorous, but highly attentive to their surroundings and circumstances. The Scout, I think, is the archetype for the orange blade, but we can't confirm that any Jedi in particular wielded it, which is indicative of just how solitary and self-assured these individuals are. I think Sith and Jedi are equally likely to produce a figure that would have an orange blade, and that's to say it's equally unlikely for either group to produce one. I think the likes of Eno Cordova or Qui-Gon Jinn would, in their youth, have been the closest things to a scout that we've seen so far. Indigo is not a wholly unique colour for a lightsaber blade. It's a combination of blue and purple, and in terms of the user, it's a blend of the Scholar and the Guardian. Now, the reason I say it's not a unique colour is because the amethyst purple is already a combination of red and blue. With the indigo, I think it pulls more blue than red, but it's still a shade of purple. The way that I look at that is that it's a Scholar who is much more stoic and headstrong, and defensive with the knowledge and intellect that he's acquired. Again, there are no canon examples of an individual wielding an explicitly indigo blade, because I view the traits within its symbolism to be those of the zealot, brazen, pious, dogmatic warrior of the light side, more akin to a hunter of the enemy than a keeper of the peace. Mace Windu, in his younger days, might have had the hot-headedness and arrogance to have an indigo blade, as it transitioned through the years from blue to purple, from Guardian to Zealot to Scholar. Like Indigo, Magenta blades are less than a separate colour, are more of a shade of a more standard hue. But unlike Indigo, Magenta is a variation of red that draws from yellow and blue as well. Because of its base colour in red, you might assume that it's an inherently Sith colour. That's not necessarily the case. Symbolically, Magenta represents compassion, but that's a product of selfishness, attachment, or self-driven goals in the sense that it requires attachment and wants and desires for you or for others. Its relationship to the red blade is less to do with anger or fury, and more to do with passion and emotion. The secondary influences being blue and yellow indicate optimism and loyalty in small percentages. So in all, it's a blade colour driven by positive emotions, unlike the red, which is driven more by negative emotions. It's not megalomania, but servitude to goals and relationships. So magenta is the colour of the servant. White is one of the rarest colours for a lightsaber blade in canon, second only to black. Insofar as colour psychology, it's the colour of purity and the ultimate expression of clarity. White light encompasses all other hues on the spectrum, excluding black, and the mentality of the wielder reflects this. White is the blade colour of the sage. The process to create a white lightsaber is different from all others. It requires a crystal which has been bled, so the red crystal of a Sith lightsaber, often taken after the disarming or killing of said Sith. The crystal then undergoes a process which is known as purifying, effectively purging the crystal of the pains and emotions that Sith used to bleed them in the first place by way of the Force. By pulling all of the character-defining qualities of the fallen Sith out and using the Force to, in effect, heal the crystal, it is restored almost to its natural state, where the crystal and the blade it produces are colourless. This can be seen as a return to neutrality within the Force, where all of the pulls to coloration are balanced, meaning in order to preserve this colourless state, the users of these blades must balance all of the archetypes at once. White is associated with innocence, purity, and illumination, and to balance 9 other very strong archetypes, one must maintain a degree of each, not giving over to the dark, but not being bathed in the light, just illuminated in the ways of the Force. Tapping into the darker qualities but not making a habit of doing it to preserve innocence, and using the light side to preserve the natural order and not to convert. To not be corrupted by the dark, as the sun was, or pious in the light, like the daughter. Famously, Ahsoka wields white blades following the Jedi Purge, and she's wise like the Consular, brave like the Guardian, intuitive like the Maverick, intelligent like the Scholar, optimistic like the Sentinel, but ferocious and powerful like the Megalomaniac when she wants to be. The manner in which she took her crystal was ruthless, and proved fatal for the Sixth Brother, for the sole purpose of allowing her to complete her lightsabers. Ahsoka has a dark streak, but it isn't a defining part of her character. The more we see of her, we see her indifference to the philosophies of Jedi and Sith, and very much that she's defining her own place within the Force. Balanced and diverse, purely focused on the Force, and not its will or powers. The wielders of white blades are not necessarily the good guys, just the most liberal with their use of the Force. The Sage is not limited in their pursuit of understanding all aspects of the Force. Black is the rarest and most erratic blade colour in the galaxy. So far, only one is known to exist, and the methods and qualities that produce this blade are completely lost to history. The origin and history of this particular blade colour are intertwined with the long and bloody history of Mandalore and its great families. Belonging originally to the Mandalore Tar Vizsla, the peerless black-bladed lightsaber known as the Darksaber hums with a distinct, mystical ringing from its broad blade. Not purely black, however, there are what seem to be streaks of white light that run the course of the blade, like sunlight streaming through the cracks of black painted glass. It's the most intimidating and challenging colour that a blade can take on, not least because black light cannot exist in the standard spectrum. It's also the opposite of white, ergo an opposite to the ideology of cherry-picking from all the various philosophies surrounding lightsaber colour. Instead, this would be the ideology that makes no distinction and taps into any and all things that influence the blade. Symbolically, black is the colour of authority and strength. I don't mean the heavy fall of a boot heel or the crushing blow of a hammer kind of authority. It's a colour of elegance and grace. This is quietly very evocative of the various Mandalorian creeds, to be gracious in defeat, steadfast in victory, strong in will, but graceful and refined in motion. Perhaps this explains why none have truly been able to wield the Darksaber without the feeling that it's somehow fighting your every move, or getting heavier in hand as each blow lands upon a target. The likes of Pre-Vizsla took authority to the degree of fascism, Maul took strength to the realm of brutality, Din takes grace to the point of hesitancy, and Bo-Katan took elegance to fragility. To master this blade, it seems one must be their own authority, with strength of mind and body to know how and when to use the Force, but the intellect and grace not to do so, and whether it's using the blade to fight, to wound or kill, or to unify and rule, one must conduct themselves elegantly to bring the Darksaber to heel. What better an archetype than the rogue? The black blade of the solitary, individualistic outcast with the ability to lead and unify, but the propensity to destroy. Unbound, unwavering and unmatched, the rogue is such an oddity and such a unique archetype within the Force that since the days of Tar-Vizsla, no one can wield this blade as competently as the Maker himself. So there you have it, guys. Guardian, Consular, Maverick, Megalomaniac, Scholar, Sentinel, Scout, Zealot, Servant, Sage, and Rogue. 11 blade colours, the meanings in their symbolism and use, and the 11 archetypes that correspond to them. Which of these archetypes do you think best describes you? Which blade colour would you want? And which of these do you think fits you the best? Personally, I'd want a cyan blade, but I think I might actually gravitate more towards yellow despite the fact that I hate the colour generally. So put yours down below. I want to see how many Sith or Jedi are watching this. These are of course just the way that I categorise them. I'm sure many of you will disagree with me, but that's okay. Colour is a subjective thing. People respond differently to different shades. So where I see the bravery in blue, you might see coldness and have a different archetype for it, and that's absolutely fine. Again, let me know in the comments and we can talk about it. Regardless of colour though, every wielder needs to know how to wield their lightsaber. So head over to part 3, where we'll break down all 7 forms of lightsaber combat and complete our comprehensive teardown and analysis of everything you need to know about the lightsaber. If you're new here, I just want to take a moment to welcome you to the Star Wars Observer. We've got a real community building up here, and we want this to be a place for all Star Wars fans to feel included. Disagree amongst yourselves by all means, but here at the Observer we debate, we don't degrade. If you want somewhere you can be yourself and enjoy this franchise with like-minded people, but still be able to discuss the finer points of the saga, hit subscribe and get involved with the community. I'll see you soon.